Former Conservative Party leader Colin Craig won't rule out a return to politics after the High Court found that whale oil blogger Cameron Slater defamed him. But that same 200-plus page ruling also found that Mr Craig was guilty of moderately serious sexual harassment of his former press secretary Rachel McGregor, and that he'd paid her a substantial amount of money so that she wouldn't complain. Now, it's hard to keep up with who is suing who when it comes to Colin Craig, but in this case, he claimed that Cameron Slater had published about 14 seriously untrue things about him. In the end, though, the court found only 2 of the claims were defamatory. Mr Slater countersued him, but that claim was dismissed. So I asked Colin Craig if he really thought that this was a win for him.
Well, it is a win, not as good a one as I'd like, because obviously there were other statements as well that I was looking to be found defamatory. But all in all, I sued him. I win on some of my things, he sued me, and he wins on none of his things. So overall, it's a win.
Well, I did a bit of a rough count. There was, I think, about 14 particular things that he said about you that you claimed were defamatory. Only 2 upheld. So
yes.
if that's victory, what does losing look like?
Losing would have been him winning. Anything that would have been particularly unpalatable. For me, there are 3 things that I really wanted out of it. One was to find that he had defamed me, which is a finding. Secondly was that he had been part of an attack on me to remove me as leader of the Conservative Party. That's a clear finding, and I'm happy with that. The third thing, and not so important, but I still would have liked to have got some award for damages, which hasn't happened. So
nobody gets anything, money-wise.
Yeah,
nobody gets anything.
Well, costs are obviously going to be in play, and I'll do better than him on that, but I still feel it ought to have been awarded some damages, because at the end of the day he did say things about me that were not only untrue but defamatory.
Yeah, but he did say a lot of things about you that the court has found were true. In broad brushstrokes, they were true.
Yeah.
And some of those things are pretty serious. They say that the finding is that you actually did sexually harass Rachel McGregor with unwanted, unwelcome written messages. So what do you say about that behaviour on your part?
Well, at the end of the day, as I say, I'm happy with the win as the big picture. Then you go down into the detail, and I've got to look at, do I appeal or contest some of that detail? So to give an example, which comes through in that, Mr Slater made the claim that I had sent sexed messages and that he had copies of them. That was not true. I hadn't sent sex messages. He didn't have copies of them. But the judge has said, but because there was some communications by way of 2 letters, he considered that close enough. Now, I don't think that's right.
You're fudging it here. This is what the court has found, and you can't cherry-pick the bits that you like about what the court has found and what you don't like.
But that's not fudging.
The court has said to you that you were guilty of moderately serious sexual harassment of Ms McGregor, and that you sent to her unwelcome, unsolicited written communication. Would you like to apologise for that behaviour?
Well, first of all, as I say, I'm happy with the overall win. That's good for me. In terms of the detail, and one thing I do have to say is obviously there are other court cases before the court, so I have to be careful not to prejudice that. So I won't go into a whole lot of detail. So I'm happy with the overall win, and I'm happy that I come out ahead. So
in the end, what you have got is now a laundry list confirmed by the court of inappropriate behaviour by you in a position of power in relation to someone who was working for you at the time, you, a man who was married and had political aspirations. We now have a list from the court of what things that you did and didn't do, and it doesn't make for great reading.
Well, look, that's the detail within the bigger picture. The big picture is I'm happy I won. The details within that, some of those I am not happy with, and so I have to decide to what extent I can live with the win or not. Some people say, well, quit while you're ahead, but within this are a lot of details, and some of those details I'm not happy with. I don't think that is the right outcome. And so I have to look at those and decide whether I want to appeal those findings or not.
OK, I'm sure you have seen what's been unfolding with the MP Jamie Lee Ross and questions raised about his behaviour. Do you see any parallels between your behaviour and some of the behaviour we're hearing about Jamie Lee Ross?
Well, look, I don't know his situation well enough to comment, so I won't comment on his situation. I think that would be unfair. What I know is my situation, and in terms of what happened here, I'm happy with the win. Within this are details that I'm not happy with. Some of those things I have to accept are true. As I think you probably already know, I have apologised. And so I've got to look at this in context and say, well, what are these things am I happy with and will I live with? And what are these things would make me want to appeal the decision?
Do you still harbour political aspirations?
Well, I think it's interesting, this harbour political aspirations thing. For me, it's always been about issues. I find myself motivated and energised by issues and things that I care about and things that other people care about and want me to represent.
But do you want to go to Parliament in order to pursue those issues? Do you want to be an MP?
I'm not unhappy to do that, but it's not a burning desire.
So you're not gonna follow that path anymore. You're not going to form another political party. You're not going to stand again.
You never say never. There are a lot of things about politics I enjoy. I like engaging on issues and I like debate. And although very inexperienced, I think on some of those things I accounted for myself quite well and gave it a good shot. Other things I probably didn't do as well as more experienced people would have done. But there are things about it that I like and I enjoy. And there's other things like people wanting to go after you and attack you and take you out as a leader, which the court has said did happen. That's hard to deal with. So coming back to your question, do I harbour aspirations? No, but I still care about the issues. And if making change on issues means getting back into the political arena at some stage, I wouldn't rule it out.
And do you think it's conceivable that you could do this with all of this information about you and your actions out there?
Oh, sure. I mean, nobody's perfect, and there are lots of people who are voted into all sorts of different positions who have done far worse. So I don't think that's the determining factor. For me at the moment...
So not great behaviour, but not bad enough to keep you out of Parliament?
Well, look, at the end of the day, nobody's behaving perfectly, and I think we all know that. I look at this, I'm happy with the win. Details within it, I have to decide what to do about. I am disappointed by that decision that I've sexually harassed somebody. That to me is hard to stack up because obviously it's about whether something's welcomed or not. And the feedback at the time was, hey, yeah, thanks for writing me a letter. Now, loved it, rereading
I'm sorry,
it.
just to be clear, are you saying that your attention wasn't unwelcome? Is that what you're saying?
That was one of
because the court says otherwise.
You've got the judgment right, and that was one of the contests in the case. And so that's one of the issues when I look at this decision and I've got to say, well, do I quit while I'm ahead or do I go back and look at some of the things? That will be one of the issues I have to consider.
But if you pause for a minute, Mr. Craig, and think about this, aren't you just articulating everything that the Me Too movement would say is wrong about men in your position?
No, I don't think that at all.
You didn't just do a bit of victim blaming there?
Why would you say that?
Well, you seem to be suggesting that the attention was welcome, where the court categorically and clearly says between 2012 and 2014 it was unwelcome attention.
Well, look, I'm not doing that, and I think that's wrong. What we're talking about here in terms of the judgment is I come out ahead. There's details within it that I am concerned about, and that finding, the finding that it was unwelcome, is a outcome that I'm concerned about. Now, obviously the judge drew a line. He said up to a certain point in time it was welcome. After that it wasn't. That's where he felt the line ought to be drawn. I don't agree with that, and obviously my case was that I didn't agree with that. Whether I accept the judgment and say, well, that's where he said it lay, or whether I challenge that judgment isn't a decision I've made yet, but it's one that I will think about.
And we've had a statement from the Rachel McGregor Trust, which has welcomed Justice Toogood's finding. Trustee Nicola Taylor says it puts it beyond any reasonable doubt or argument that Mr. Craig indeed sexually harassed Rachel McGregor during the course of her employment with him.